Hey guys, we're back with the MattZilla U4 build, and I want to give you an overview of all the electronics that we've currently installed. When we built the transmission, we talked about using the stock motor. We changed the gearing on it. We're going to maintain using the axial, which is a sidewinder, ESC, stock servo off the Wraith, and all that other stuff. But now that we have it all installed, I wanted to show you where we put stuff, why we did what we did, and some of the weird extra stuff that we've actually added to it. Also want to show you what we did with our radio setup. We're using a hacked GT3C. These radios that we buy come from HeyOK Performance, fantastic Canadian electronics builder. If you know anything about HeyOK, you know that you get the finest quality electronics that money can buy in RC. Handmade winch controllers, I mean stuff that works for us, made by an RC guy for RC guys. I think that's fantastic, and obviously he knows what we need. We need high power winch controllers, we need radios that have lots of good options, good setups. He provided for us anyway, and we just asked him for some really good programming instructions for the GT3C, which he provided. We've gotten custom light controllers from HeyOK. It's been fantastic. So we're going to talk about all that setup today, and I also want to spend a little bit of time at the end of the video doing a whole bunch of close-ups on the actual frame, the setup, the suspension, the positions, the mounting. So we're going to do a bunch of close-up stuff at the end. For now, let's get started about electronics, and we're going to continue with our MattZilla build right now. So, back at it. I want to give you an overview of what I actually want to do with this truck. So as we talked about at the very beginning, in the first video in the series, we pretty much determined that I was never going to use this in an actual U4 race. We don't have that class of running over here where we are. So for me to get together with a bunch of guys to do U4 is probably unlikely. Now, that said, we have a lot of Class 2.5, Class 3 trail runs that we like to do a lot of TTC kind of material. We've got some really crazy riverbeds, round rock, hill climbs, all that kinds of stuff. And so what I wanted to do was create a rig based on this U4 chassis from MattZilla. Wanted to create a rig that would be very capable, that would have the kind of balance and performance that I'm used to building. When we build scale trucks, we build them low, we build them with little suspension travel. They become very solid, very consistent, very easy to drive trucks. With the suspension geometry we have here, that's exactly what we ended up with. I've got the tires off it right now because I want to show you the kinds of stuff that we do to get it there with the close-ups that we're going to do in a minute. But because this is a lot more of a fun rig than a competition rig, I didn't want to build it with a lot of the more expensive electronics. I didn't want to put into it some of the more competitive type of materials as far as setup, motor, speed control and stuff. So we're using the stock Wraith equipment as much as possible in order to keep the project affordable, and also to essentially we're going to end up doing a bit of a review on how the stock electronics will work with this setup. And once we get it out on the rocks and we show you videos of that, you'll see whether or not we've scored with our setup, or whether we failed with the setup, whether we need to do a motor upgrade or not. Does this motor have enough torque even with the really low gearing that we've created? So we need to check all that out. And we're gonna do a whole bunch of running videos on this. I've got a couple of fantastic, really big, rocky, articulation requiring trails, and so that should be great. I'm going to continue to run this on a 2-cell battery, and there's a couple reasons for that. It would be really easy to drop in a 3-cell 2200, get a whole bunch of kick out of this, a whole bunch of wheel speed and stuff, except what I really want to do with this truck is, for my own fun, for my own time out on the trail is I want to turn this into an FPV cruiser that I can use as a regular viewed, you know, track running, rock running truck, or I can sit on my back deck and drive for 2 hours out in the woods with my FPV and have just as much fun with the same rig. So we're keeping the 2-cell setup. The 2-cell battery is going with the stock 20-turn motor, is not going to give me the kind of wheel speed that I would want if I was doing a U4 race. I'm not going to get the top end out of it. I'm using the stock transmission with some upgrades, as you know. And so keeping the horsepower low is going to keep this truck running for a really long time. I'm not that concerned about the speed control reliability. It's a Castle Sidewinder rebranded. They're very strong. They're easy to program. It's gonna last forever on 2-cell. I could easily run that Sidewinder setup on a 3-cell as well. I've done it many times in the truck setups. But for this case, I don't want to do that. Second reason why I'm leaving it 2-cell, because in my Yeti XL, I run the Turnigy Ultimate Nanos. Here's a battery here. This is the battery that I run in my Yeti XL. I run 2 of these. This is a 2-cell 7500 90C. Ridiculous. So, total overkill for this truck, except that considering it probably draws maybe 6 or 7 amps at the most. With the FPV system, I might be 8 or 9 amps at the most. I probably can run this truck until my transmitter battery dies. You know, I mean, the long running time on this truck is going to be just insane, considering I'm not going to do high speed. I'm probably doing slow FPV crawling with it, and I'm probably going to get 3, 4, 5 hours of runtime with this one battery. So, can't wait. I really can't wait. Now, let's talk about the setup. Equipment that we have in here right now, I'll do a quick rundown of the electronics. We have the Axial original Castle Sidewinder ESC that came in the Wraith. Switch the plugs over to Dean's, of course. Do not use white connectors, ever. They will mischarge your batteries. They will trip your ESC cutoff. They will get dirty. They get loose. The little clamped ring inside the white connectors starts to slowly open up and you get the disconnect in your battery. I've seen more electronics faults because of this white connector. Cut it off. Don't even put an adapter on it. Cut it off. Put a Dean's plug on it. T connector, an XT60, set of bullets, something else. Don't ever use it. Terrible connectors. Why a Wraith comes factory with that connector, I'll never know. But anyways, we cut it off, put a Dean's. We're using a Dean's T connector as well on our big 7500s that are going in our Yeti XL, so that's a reuse for that. Motor is a Wraith 20-turn in the stock position. We talked about that already. The servo is the original Tactic servo. We've got the factory Wraith servo back on the axle in the front on the Diamond SSD front Wraith axle. And then we mounted the battery right in here behind the dash. You can see it's basically following the dash profile on top. It misses the spur gear no problem. And it's one strap on the MattZilla frame that wraps it right around. So it's super easy. You can slide the battery in here, drop it down in the hole, strap your Velcro, and you're done. 7500 wide. Full. This is a full ROAR size battery, 2-cell battery pack. Easy, bullet plugs, lots of room for bullet plugs. So we're very happy with that setup. Now in the back we did a bunch of weirdness, and I'll tell you what's going on in the back here. As you can see, we have our FPV camera on here now. This is the antenna. I'll just put that out of the way. Here's the FPV camera. This camera goes up and down all over the place, controlled by the radio. It also pivots left and right so that we can actually look around a full 180 degrees. 90 left and 90 right. And we've got the up and down on the radio, the left and right on the radio. In this, I 3D printed a couple of parts here, which I want to show you. and I'm going to pull in the zoom for that so we can actually start looking at some of the detailed setup here. So let me just mess around with the camera here and get this turned down. We'll bring this right in here. There we go. Okay. So, what I did is I printed this little bracket. I printed a little U bracket in here that mounts this bottom gimbal servo right there. It also bolts into this little printed black box. I created this little printed black box. You can see it right there. This little box, all it does is actually host my FPV electronics in the top. That's all it does. So I dropped in my transmitter here. You can see the antenna output. Dropped in my transmitter, got all my little wiring in there. I'm going to build a nice little cute cover for the back here so that this is all protected. Just to keep the splashing and stuff out of it. But essentially, this is what I added into the back. This is the non-RC part of the electronics. It's just for my FPV fun. And I'm actually going to plug this in now and turn it on because I want you guys to see that the camera moves all over the place all on its own. It's really, really cool, actually. Let me get this plugged in here. It's really good to still have the side panels off right now because I wanted to show you guys all this before I have the thing all covered up. So, fantabulous. Now, on the radio system, what I've got going on the radio is, you can see here I've reprogrammed a whole bunch of my buttons. So this button right here actually raises and lowers my camera in 5-degree increments. And I set up the end stops so that it doesn't crash into the cage. And then the other thing that I did with the camera was on the trim right here, on the actual, I repurposed the dual rate button on there, and I repurposed it for my camera turning. So I get 45 degrees every time I click it. I got 45 left. Well, first let's start with 90 left. I got 90 left. I got 45 left. Centered. 45 right. 90 right. Okay? So I can adjust the camera, and then I can still use the top buttons here to set the camera up and down. So let's say I've got a rock jammed in my right wheel. I'm going to go all the way to the right. I'm going to look up and down here and see if I can't find out what's actually going on. Am I on the right button? I'm going to start looking around on my wheel and see if I can find out what's jamming in my back wheel. And the funny thing is, the back wheel is actually like right here. So the camera's pointing directly at the back wheel. It's the coolest thing ever. The other thing I did on this is I slowed down the servo speed. You can do this on these fancy programmable radios. In the menu options, you can actually set the speed of the servo. So instead of the servo jerking hard left and just which is going to be really hard to see in the FPV, I slowed it down. So the travel on the servo is actually really slow. You know, have a look at this. That's as fast as it goes. And there's my 45 left, 90, 45 0, 45 90, 45 0. So you get an idea how that goes. Now, I want to just spend a second talking about what's going on with the suspension setup. I'm going to open this up just a bit. There we go. And on the rear links, well, first of all, let me talk about the receiver. So I stuck the receiver underneath my radio tray. You can see it right here. The receiver is actually upside down. It's shoe-gooed onto the bottom of my transmitter tray. And then the wiring goes down like this, and it's tied onto this lower link right here. So as the suspension moves, the wiring moves. Yes, that's true. Except that you can pretty much never get water or dirt in there because the receiver's upside down. And because of that, the water just jumps right out. The dirt will never go in. It's a fantastic little setup that just keeps everything clean and dry. So unless I completely dunk the truck, which is going to be an awful lot of water, I'll have no issue with electronic failures, and I will cover the top so that this doesn't have any dust and stuff getting in it either. Now have a look at this rear suspension. I told you in the suspension video that we had changed the way the links and shocks mount on there. I'm going to get right in on that so you can see it. So what we did here is we used the tab facing the transmission. We didn't use the top shock mount, but instead we actually mounted the shock to the inside of the mount. You see that? So I snipped off this section right here. So this is snipped off here at the shock to give the shock some clearance. And then we mounted the shock opposite the link. Let me get this to focus here. You see that? So we mounted the shock on the inside, and on the front we did the conventional way. So there's the rear setup right there. And we'll move over to the front here. In the front, it's totally conventional. We used the link on the bottom. We used the shock on the top. We used the top hole towards the transmission. The link is long on this side. And pretty happy with that. Now the other thing that I did with the electronics here is on the bottom links, I actually zip tied on the little ESC tray. You remember way back in the comp crawler days, we used to glue or strap a little tray onto the top links and use it for a radio tray. Remember that back in the comp days, the MOA days and stuff? Well, I decided to adopt that again because the ESC fits in there perfectly. It's not in the way of anything. And it was really easy to just use the original ESC mount and actually attach it to the link right here, and then I added a little tiny bit of shoe glue just to keep it from sliding around. So now I've got my ESC in a really nice spot. It moves around, no problem. No, I don't care, it doesn't matter, it's not in the way of anything. You can see the angle of the battery setup on there now. The battery is sitting just like a dashboard here. So when I do go to put the interior in it, the interior panel that I'm going to make will slide right in here. Get that out of the way. The interior panel will slide right in the front, and it will cover this whole thing. It'll drop in with a couple of drop down spots for the seats, and I should be able to consume just about all that space. And then when it's time for the battery change, I'll just pull out the interior panel out the front window, drop the battery in, strap it, slide the interior panel back in, and I'm done. It should be really, really easy. The second option that I have going on for this is I may actually make the interior panel into two pieces so that right about here I will have the seats and the back of the interior that remains in the truck, and then I'll have the front dashboard and the drop downs here behind the dash. I'll have those removable, and then I can change the battery, drop that back in. In any case, it's going to be top loading, and it's going to be really, really easy to do. So that's how I set this up. That's where the electronics are. This is where I did how I did the wiring. I want to give you a bit of an interesting note about how I did the steering here. Obviously my steering trim is out, but I'll show you what I did with the steering. Now, I used the SSD Wraith link on the bottom. So it's underneath the SSD knuckle. And then what I did is I twisted the rod ends. The one on this side is twisted one way, the one on this side is twisted the other way. And what it does is it actually keeps the rod from twisting. So this rod end doesn't want to go any farther because it's already at the edge of the ball. This rod end, you can see, is twisted down, and it's at the edge of the ball. And so when my steering rod is being pushed by the push rod, when the tie rod's being pushed by the push rod, it doesn't want to twist. It stays in line. And I actually didn't have enough room with the wheel on to put the tie rod all the way over to here because the rim is tucked in so tight on those wheels that it's actually, the rim is like right there over the top of the knuckle and the steering arm, and I actually couldn't put a ball end on top. I could put it on the bottom, but I couldn't put it on the top. So with those crazy rims that I've got, which are from RC Mart, those are like so incredibly tight on the fitting onto the hub that there's just no room for that on top, and that's a good note to make. Now maybe with some different kind of knuckle it would work, but on this case it didn't work, so that was the choice I had to make there. So that's the setup for the MattZilla U4, and the electronics and the radio and the suspension. I want to get you some detail viewing on that. We're very excited to get this out on the rocks. It shouldn't be too long, and I'm going to start on the panels and then build up my interior, and we're going to take this thing out and do some rock crawling fun with it in a traditional way, and we'll also do a whole bunch of rock crawling on the FPV, and that should be a fantastic time. This should be a really stable, nice rig to take out on the rocks, and so we're looking forward to showing that off to you guys. And next up is going to be panels and some decorations from Freaky Skins Graphics. Really can't wait to get that going. It's going to look fantastic, so see you soon.